Hello, everybody. This is the Charlie Paparelli Show. Welcome. I am Charlie Paparelli. You know, we all think that in a lot of cases, entrepreneurs are sort of born, but there's a lot of people who became entrepreneurs because other people saw it in them before they even saw it in themselves. And that's what's going to be, we'll be talking about today with a good friend of mine and a great entrepreneur, Frank Tighe. Frank, but before we get to Frank, I'll just tell you a bit about myself. I am a 25-year plus angel investor. I was doing it professionally. I've invested in over 35 companies. And during that time, I've met hundreds of entrepreneurs. And in doing so, I've learned how to start businesses from scratch, particularly in the technology sector. So, with that, I'm glad that you joined us. And to subscribe, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe at paparelli.com, and you'll never miss one of these episodes. It'll also show you where my YouTube channel is, and we also publish these on podcasts for those who don't have time to just watch a video. So with that, I'd like to welcome my friend Frank. And let me give you a little background first. Frank and I met when he became the lead entrepreneur in residence at the Advanced Technology Development Center down at Georgia Tech. His job is to help the entrepreneurs that are part of their most promising companies to succeed, to get to $1 million ARR, annual recurring revenue level, so that they might graduate and then get their bigger funding to become unicorns in our community. So Frank knows how to choose those entrepreneurs in residence and knows how to coach them, and so that they can coach and help other entrepreneurs. Also, Frank is an entrepreneur himself. That's how he got the job, and that's how he understands startups. So he is a servant, and mostly people don't know his story because Frank, and you'll get to see, Frank just is not one of these guys that just likes talking about Frank. But today we're going to get his story on record. So Frank, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be with you. I enjoy what you do so much for entrepreneurs in Georgia, and I love this show, and I never miss an episode. So it'll be a little strange for my family and myself to see me here, but
well, this is
I'm not certain I can.
Go. Finally, You're going to be recognized as a superstar that you really are, Frank.
Well, it's great to be here. I love what I'm doing. I feel very fortunate, very blessed with my circumstances and my family and my work life. And it's just amazing how it's all turned out.
Yep. God is good.
Yes,
but tell
sir,
us, and you kind of grew up in with that as a big part of your foundation, a part of that. That's sort of, that is your value system. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up so that we understand a little bit more about where you kind of come from.
Yeah, my mom and dad were from Detroit, Michigan, and my dad had a small business. He was a clothing manufacturer. And in the 60s, the South was like China is now, or Vietnam. It was they moved here to a town called Anniston, Alabama, for the labor cotton railroad, and it was the only town that they scouted that also had a Catholic school. So my family's faith was very important. My mother moving from Detroit to Anniston, Alabama, in the late 50s was a big deal. And she insisted on a town with a Catholic school. So they looked at Bremen, Georgia, and these other towns that had, rail access and factories, but no Catholic school. So we ended up in Anniston, Alabama, and that's where I grew up. And my dad had this small business. He had a clothing manufacturing company, and he would manufacture women's clothing. And then he had sales reps and distribution that would sell it private label to stores like Bell Cutson's and others. And
I see.
And small.
Was your father, was it something that, did you have a lot of brothers and sisters, or?
I'm one of 7.
Whoa. And, good Catholic family.
Yeah, that's right. There's 5 boys and 2 girls.
And where are you in the pecking order?
I'm number 6 of 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and a bunch of my brothers are entrepreneurs, and my uncles, and I came from this family of small business owners, is really what we called them, then. And I honestly, as a kid, we always had lemonade stands, and we were buying candy by the box at the store and reselling it to our friends. And I was always doing those kinds of things. In college, I remember I I went and got Krispy Kreme donuts to make money and would buy them and resell them in the married student housing. So I had this kind of streak where it was really out of necessity. I didn't have lots of resources. We had a really big family, and it was, paying for your own everything was just how I came up. If I wanted it, I had to go earn.
Did you have a dad that talked about his business, with his
Yes.
children?
Yeah, and we went there.
So he didn't
and
keep it private from you, so that it was just you and
No.
your mom, and he went to work, kind of a thing. You knew what he did.
No. Yeah, we went down there and we cut cloth and help him out, and we're a part of it. One of the things actually that started me away from the path of this is how I saw how hard it was. And when he was very cyclical depending on the economy and the labor markets and stuff, and he had some trouble, and he had personal guarantees and loans. And I saw the pressure, and I went away from that.
What did you see? You call it
struggle.
The pressure. Yeah, tell me of the pressure that
he was under tremendous pressure to make payroll. And
plus he had a wife and 6 kids, 7 kids.
My mom was at home with 7 children, and we were in private school, and it was a lot for him, and so I saw the pressure, the toll that it took on him, and I was kind of determined to go to school and to work in a company and maybe become an executive one day or something. That was in my mind.
What was it like with? So I could see where your dad was under this tremendous pressure. So he has a lot going out as far as, he's got to meet a lot of these needs of his family, right? Not only, clothing and food and shelter and all that, but also he has to make sure you guys get educated. He put you in private schools because your mother insisted on that, from what I understand.
That's right.
What was your mother like in all of that? How did your mom and dad, here he is, this consummate entrepreneur in this business trying to make it go to support his family. What role did she play?
My mom was the one who gave us all the confidence. She was this incredibly faithful, devout Catholic, and loved her faith and loved her family, but also believed in us and everything. She always said to me, "You can do whatever, and why not you? Well, why aren't you going to be the class president, or why aren't you doing this? Of course she just gave you this incredible love, unconditional love, always." My mother was an amazing person. And she was really the one that we saw all the time. And Dad was in that traditional role of, you kind of feared him. He was the hammer. And looking back on it now, I feel bad for the guy. He was just working all the time, and we sort of adored her and feared him, but she was able to just be there and care for us. But then that was her role,
What was the fear? You say you feared your father.
Just because, if she sort of said, if you got out of line, wait till your father comes home.
Okay, yeah, that's the traditional line. That's it, right?
Yeah. And he was really a wonderful guy and loved us like crazy. But it's not like today with my children, I feel like I'm closer in a way. That this generation of fathers, we do more with them. And it's harder for us because we feel their pain more. I don't think my dad felt my pain. He was like, suck it up, get it done. It was, he was a World War II vet. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and, he grew up without a dad. His dad had died. And so he was tough and a disciplinarian, but a great guy with a great moral
he expected
code.
You to do the right thing, to work hard. If you had to study, you had to study hard. It was all about doing what, you should be grateful for everything that you've got compared to the sort of the life that he had to live, which really got
100%. He was this World War II veteran. His father had died when he was young, and his brother, who was like a father to him that was 1 year older, was killed on D-Day +2. And he found out about it because he got a letter in the mailbag and with a stamp on it, and it said, "Return, recipient deceased." So here's his brother, who was like his father figure, and that's how he found out. And that was very formative kind of for him. He was on his own, and it was just tough, I think, for him.
Yeah.
But he was a great father.
So he's a great father, and he's a great, and he was succeeding as a small business guy, entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure, he did pretty well, and probably since he was paying for your private schools and all that, I'm sure that you got everything that you wanted, right?
It was fabulous, but then his business failed when I was in high school.
Oh.
And we were actually in Catholic boarding school and in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. on the coast near New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
And it was all the boys in my family went to that school. My mother wanted us to continue to get a Catholic education. And and when his business failed, we were going to have to leave, and the school let us stay and didn't have to pay tuition.
Wow.
They just were, it was an act of kindness that changed the arc of my life, to allow me to finish and to graduate. I know my brothers and I got together and did an insurance policy on me that they have, and one day, that'll come to the school when I die.
Oh,
As a way
really?
to sort of to pay that back.
But when you were
But they,
growing up, you were also in a position where, he didn't have a lot of extra money, I guess, to kind of to give you the things that you wanted to have as a young man, as
no,
as
yeah,
well as your
we
siblings.
worked
So,
from the earliest days. I had a job, all summer starting in the 8th grade, and I always worked all through college. I put myself through college, working 40 hours a week and going to class and working in the summer.
but
And
what about, just for those guys that, like today, a big part of what goes on today is you expect your kids to be in sports, right? So
yeah,
how does it work that can kids actually, as with this next generation or the people that we're talking to, can kids actually be in sports and have jobs and be taught to work?
I don't see that anymore. I don't see lots and lots of kids, even my own, they didn't do a lot of that, you know,
Really?
they just, they just went to school.
So
Yeah.
you didn't do to them what happened to you
No, no,
because
I
the
don't know that I
necessity
was,
wasn't there. Is that it?
that's right. That's right.
But if it was
Mine was, and it
wasn't
was
it
the
the
thing
right
that
thing to
made
do?
me, it was the thing that made me, Charlie, to have to work hard and do everything. But then you want to do so much, for your own kids that I think, you learn from that.
So let me
But
tell you.
luckily
So
I'd have,
here's the guy. So here you are. Your kids are all adults now, right?
yeah,
And thank
yeah,
God they're all employed, right?
yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Do you look back on that, or have you looked back on that have I? Okay, and said, I did like you. I kind of worked my way when I was a kid because if I wanted things, I wanted to make my own money. When I started making my own money, it was like that was really exciting to me. To have
Yeah.
that sort of sense of independence that I was worth something to somebody, they would pay me, and then I could do what I want. Right? Is
Yeah.
You're feeling the same way? Did you ever have any regrets that you didn't do that for your kids?
Yes. I think my wife was more of the school. They need to do more things and they need to do this. And I wanted them to go to school and do well. And I wanted to give them everything that I never had.
Right.
And so I think I overdid it a little bit. I think, but I'll tell you what, and every father maybe feels like this. I have beautiful, lovely children. And I never was the dad who cared if they were on the dean's list. I wanted them to be good people. And
Huh.
they're really lovely people. And so I'm so proud and happy of how it's all worked out. But I think I would have, had them work and do more. I think my
Well,
success
how do you do if
sort
you
of,
say I want them to be good people? What does that
yeah.
mean? One, and secondly, once you tell me what it means, what did you do to make sure that that happened?
Yeah.
What's your wife's
We
name?
cared.
Ellen?
My wife's Ellen.
Ellen, yeah. So
Ellen.
what did you
Yeah.
and Ellen do? So what does it mean? I want them to be
Faith,
good people.
faith and family and your word is your bond, and faith and family come first,
Okay.
and honor and decency, and you do the right thing and you tell the truth and you work hard and you respect elders and those old fashioned kind of values.
Yeah.
My kids are yes, sir, and yes,
So the
ma'am. And
values you grew up with, you didn't
yeah,
put those aside. You infused
no,
those into your
no.
kids.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
how did you
for
do that?
sure.
How did you and Ellen do
Well,
that?
like, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but we had friends that say, how do you get your teenagers to go to church? My kids, it's like the sun's coming up. We're going, it's what we do, and we model that. They never even once at 13 said, I'm not going to mass. I mean, so I
Okay.
don't know. It was this, that faith was the central part, that prayer was in our home, that we love them unconditionally. I'll say the difference between, this might be a little too much sharing, Charlie, but my dad was the World War II generation, and he loved me for sure, but he wouldn't come right out and just say it. Right. And so I remember as an adult visiting them when they were retired in Florida, and I went to see him, and I decided I would always tell him that I loved him, and I'd kiss him before I went and just tell him this. I wanted him to know. And I said, "I love you, Dad." And the first time he said, "Back at you." That's as good as he could do. And at the end, I think after years, he'd say, "Love you too, Frankie." He couldn't, and I wanted my kids to know. And so I know first of all, my wife and I, we told them we love them. We demonstrated that we did. We're in their corner always.
Yeah.
And, encouraging them to do the right thing, spending time with them. So our thing was, what are they doing this weekend? Our whole thing was our family. We wanted our house to be the house where the kids came to. And
but it also looks
strict.
to me, though, Frank, it looks to me, knowing you a little bit, is that you weren't that hypocritical parents. In other words, don't do as I do, just do as I say. You basically set a very good example. That's the church thing. In other words, it's good for you to go to church, but I'm kind of busy today, so mom's going to take you. No, the sun came up, you went to church too. Okay. So they just saw it. I mean, it was just, there's this consistency of behavior and values that they couldn't miss. Also, I think your brothers and sisters and how close your family is sort of the reinforcement as the next level out, if you will. Talk to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I have a big family. I've got all these brothers and sisters and all these cousins. And when we do Thanksgiving, there's 50 people here we host it. And also I'm one of 7, but my dad, all of his siblings have 7. So we have all of these cousins and we're all close and we travel and do reunions and get together. And family has just been the center of that. And we really cared about who they hung out with, like if we were out of town, we knew who the parents were that would make sure that they got to mass, that they also were at home, and parents that were kind of strict like we were. I remember our kids would try to, "Hey, we want to spend the night here." "No, we're going out of town. You can stay with this family or Uncle Marty." That was it. We wanted to, we did too much.
How did you, as with all of your siblings, okay?
Yeah.
How did the family not sort of melt away? Like so many families do, particularly in, I'll say, our generation. You're quite a bit younger than I am, but still, we were the generation that sort of moved away from the homes that we're at. So we kind of wind up being all over the country, if you will. My father used to say, you and your sister made me and your mom gypsies, okay? Because they had to kind of go around the country to visit us. So how does the family stay together? I admire that so much, the way you guys.
We were super fortunate geographically, Charlie. We all moved away. I moved to California at the start of my career. My brother moved to Manhattan. And so we were scattered for a while, but through work or luck or whatever, everyone ended in Atlanta when their kids were little. And so we all, Anniston, Alabama is only 2 hours from here. So this is the big city on I-20, kind of near here.
So was there a period of time where you guys, when you had moved to these different cities, that there was more of a separation?
There was among, say, my sisters and I, or some of my family, but I'm super close to my brothers in age. And so we were always talking and communicating, and, and my parents were in Florida at the beach, and we would all get together there. So, but now that we're mostly here in Atlanta, we still see each other a lot.
But that was something. Do you think that did your father, was he the one that sort of brought that value of family?
Oh, yes.
Or was it your mother? Or both?
Even my cousins say to me, my dad would travel to every wedding, and he was the uncle that everyone knew. And my family's like that. I do that now. I go to all the cousin weddings. And when we sold our company to a public company in California, my cousins that live out there, I got them together. And when I would travel to Johns Hopkins, the ones in Maryland, I would see. And I love that. We all, our cousins and our children all know each other.
The cousins, all of the cousins and all the children.
All of my first cousins, all of their children know my children.
How did they know? How did you keep that together? That's another thing.
We did reunions, and we would get together at Christmas and go see them and make time and take trips and include them on the trips. And they would do the same with us.
See, one of the things that happened for us is when I was traveling, this was back in the late 80s, is we wound up buying a condo down in Hilton Head. And Kathy, and this is when our kids were little, so I would actually commute in the summertime into Hilton Head. And what happened is Kathy would invite her sisters in, which they would bring their children. And
Yeah.
because of that, they all sort of would spend weeks together in the summertime, even though they were in Denver or in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And today, those cousins are all like brothers and sisters and super close. But
Very similar for us.
yeah,
In my career, because we uh, had this, uh, travel requirement for the job where I was traveling all the time. I was in every state, so I could see all of my cousins
I
and get
see.
to know their children, and then they would come to see us, and so we've sort of kept that tradition going.
So did Ellen come from a big family too? Because this is taking on a pretty full load when you marry a man who has six siblings.
She has just jumped into it with all of us, but yeah, she has uh, three sisters and a brother.
Okay,
She was the only natural child of her family, and her sisters, her mom's sister died, and so those two daughters came to live with them as her sisters, and
I
then her
see.
mother adopted a brother and a sister, and she has a great family, and we see all their children, and
All right.
it's really
Well,
fun.
I think one of the things that I greatly admire about you, Frank, is the way that you stay together. Sometimes I'll just let the audience know. Sometimes I'll call Frank, and he'll say, "Oh, yes, I'm down here with Marty, and we're on the boat, or me and my brothers are just coming back from Florida together from a trip we took." And it's just incredible how close you guys are, and how much you don't see that in a lot of families, but you were very intentional about
We're super
keeping
super
people
fortunate.
together. Whereas when I look at that Hilton Head story that I told you, I give credit to Kathy and her vision for
Yeah.
family rather than mine, because we never really did stay together as a very close family from the Paparelli side, if you will, But she did a great job, and she brought me along with it, and looks like you and Ellen did it together, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
So how did you get
she's
out of?
fantastic.
How did you ever get out of Anniston, Alabama, or this boarding school in where, Mississippi?
Yeah, Bay St. Louis, about 40 minutes from New Orleans. It's sort of a
Okay,
beach
great.
town for the New Orleans. It's the weekend town for New Orleans
So how
people.
do you make it out of there? Where do all those people go? Do they go to Yale and Harvard and other Ivy League schools?
A lot of them were wealthy families. We were there for the faith, and my mom. There was no Catholic high school in our town, and we happened to have a connection to the school. And
Okay.
but I ended up back. My parents were in Alabama, and I went. It was the state school was either Auburn or Alabama, and I
Hey,
went to
before we
Auburn.
get to this,
Auburn. Yeah, yeah,
wait, Frank, before we get to this, I
yeah.
have to have you tell this story about your mother getting you into, was it that high school? Was that the school?
Oh, yeah,
You and
yeah.
your brother?
Yeah, it was actually my brother. My mother is a woman
This
of
is a
strong.
this story has stuck with me from the moment you told me, which was probably 5 years ago, and I think you need to share it with people.
My mom's a woman.
This says everything about your mother.
Yeah, she's a woman of super strong faith. And my oldest brother was at the boarding school, and my parents couldn't decide. They wanted to send my brother Marty, the next one in line, but they didn't think they could afford it. And my mother, I think, essentially just wouldn't hear of it. She just was going to get my dad to agree. And so they agreed late. Well, there was no room. And so he was placed on a waiting list. And so my mother would call, and they said, no, there's no movement on the list. And so when she's going to bring my oldest brother down for school, she brought Marty with all of his stuff, including his bike. And she showed up the night before, and they checked my brother into the dorm, and they said they were sorry that that nothing moved on the waiting list. And she said, well, we'll stay overnight and have breakfast tomorrow and come to mass in the morning before we leave, and maybe something will happen overnight. And some kid dropped out that night, and after mass they said an opening happened, and she moved him right in, including his bike. She just had this faith that it was going to happen, and that she was prepared for it. That's how that was really what my mom was all about.
And here you are now in your late 50s saying that's a story that you're proud to tell about your mom. She's
Yeah,
sorry,
she
man.
was
I'm
fantastic.
sorry I never met the woman. She died just recently. Was it last year?
Last year.
How old?
Yeah, she was 93.
93.
And
And
she
you were
lived with
great.
all of us. We didn't want to have her in a nursing home, and so she lived with our family. She would spend a month with each of the families, and we did that for about 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
And my kids got to know her and love her. It was great. It's really great.
Fantastic. All right, so tell me then. Auburn comes up. How does that come up?
Yeah. It was really interesting. I needed to make money in order to pay for it. And it sort of defined my career. I ended up my dad designed manufactured clothing. And so I went and interviewed in the nicest men's store, sort of the preppy men's store in town. And I
In
came
town
in the
where?
summer in Auburn,
In
Auburn,
Auburn, okay.
Alabama. Yeah. And I needed a job. And I had gotten a job in another business. I came in the summer and interviewed, and they hired me at Tower Records, one of these record stores. And then when I came to town to start school, it was one of my first big problems that I faced, where it was, you think that it was unfair or whatever. I showed up for work and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we gave it to somebody else." After they had given it to me, they just took it away. And he said, "I'm sorry, I gave it to somebody else." And I had no income and I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I started just knocking on doors. And
In town?
yeah,
This is at the retail
now
stores?
yes, and school's starting, and it hasn't everybody already taken every job. And I went to this clothing store, and the owner was there, and his guy who was the manager happened to be out of town, and he was shorthanded. And I said, that I was looking for work, that my dad designed, he manufactured clothing. He goes, "Well, why don't we'll try you out right now?" And so someone was in the store, and I went up and sold them a shirt and a tie and something, and he hired me. And then I worked there 40 hours a week, all 4 years. And then I ended up meeting all the sales reps that came into town to sell the clothing to the different stores. And I got an interview in the Atlanta Apparel Mart with one of the brands that sold the shirts. That was our major supplier.
And
it
you
was
met him when he came to town to sell the shirts?
The sales rep told me who the sales manager was.
Oh, okay.
And it was really actually a great story, Charlie. So I go and I meet with this VP of sales, and he lives in Manhattan, and he flies down to Atlanta to the menswear mart, to their showroom for the big show. And he invites me to come for an interview. And I'm a college student. I don't know anything, and I'm nervous. And the clothing store gave me a suit for graduation, so I think it still has the tags on it. And I show up with my resume, and I'm terrible, Charlie. I'm yes sir, no sir, being super polite and Southern. And he's from New York, and he's aggressive, and he's a salesman.
What do you remember about the interview?
Well, the big thing that happened, I had been listening to these sales tapes, and I didn't know what a closing statement was or anything about sales, but there was these tapes that had these corny lines that I thought were so corny I couldn't say them out loud. But it was a closing statement. And so he says to me, "Listen, you seem like a polite, nice guy, but polite, nice guys don't make it in sales. So I tell you what, why don't you mail me a copy of your resume and we'll keep it on file." And he's ushering me out the door. And this is part of being hungry, having to have it, telling all my fraternity brothers I'm going to get this job, having no other prospects. I'm going to go back empty-handed. I can't let this happen. And I panicked. So I stopped him and I said, "Listen, if I wanted to mail the resume, I wouldn't have driven all the way here from Auburn. Look, Mr. Newberger, if I can share enough information with you today to let you see that I'm the guy, are you willing to place me in the territory today?" This was from this tape, right? And he goes, "Tiger, where have you been?" And he sits me back down, and we restart the interview, and he hires me. He had his hand on my back, and he was pushing me out the door. And I used this thing that I had heard on this tape.
You didn't feel like you could really say out loud because
it sounded so corny. But it was my first understanding of what a closing statement would be in a sale, to ask for the order.
Yeah, but you said something that was really important. It wasn't about just winning that job. It was because you had to win that job.
Absolutely. That's
what would have happened if you didn't? Where would have you been?
I think about that all the time. These moments that change the arc of your life. And that was one of those moments. And I'm not really certain, but I knew that I also had this peer group that friends that had given me the tapes that were counting on me, and I had told them I was going to get this. I couldn't go home without it. And so part of being hungry and needing it is, in an entrepreneur, are you going to quit? The ones that make it don't quit. You'll have a million times when you can't make payroll, when you've got to raise money, when you're up against it, when you have all of these problems. And really the key is not quitting.
Right.
And I learned that early.
I think that the other thing that was really good is not only not quitting, but you start doing stuff that you never dreamt you'd be able to do. Like you said, there's this closing statement, and you go like, oh, I could never say that. That's embarrassing. Man, when it came push come to shove, you said it. And it worked.
The name of the guy was Tom Hopkins. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy
Famous
Hopkins.
Sales trainer, yeah.
We used to listen to he would say stuff like to someone, I like me best when I'm with you. And you'd be like, you can't believe this stuff,
How did you get into when you're in college? How did you get into who influenced you or made you aware of this learning how to sell better, like developing yourself outside of your course curriculum?
Yeah. My brother Marty was a year older than I was. And he has a friend who was also very entrepreneurial, Dan Ivey. And Marty and Dan were listening to these Tom Hopkins tapes. And he sent them to me. And I'm listening to them and thinking, wow, this guy was so successful. So, when you're younger.
Wait a minute. When your older brother sends you something, how often does the older brother have such influence that you say, oh, well, I'll take the time to listen to this?
Yeah, he had a lot of influence in my life. My mom used to say, if she shot at one of us, she'd hit us both. We're 14 months apart, Irish twins kind of a thing, And I just sort of rode in his wake quite a bit, I would say. So you've met Marty.
So you trusted Marty, and so when he said you really should do this, you did it.
Yeah, and I've always been somebody who would, now it's so much easier with Google. If you want to teach yourself anything, it's out there. And we used to buy. There was Nightingale Conant Corporation had tapes.
He did, yeah.
And we would buy those tapes and listen to Wayne Dyer on psychology. My brother and Dan and Marty and my friend group that sort of was.
And you would talk about them.
Yeah, we would talk about it.
So it became a mastermind group in effect, what we would know as a mastermind group now.
Yeah, yeah.
But you had something, it's one thing, you had something that other people don't have, and that is you had a mentor from a very, very young age.
Yeah.
People don't really have that.
Yeah, no, it's super important. And he actually started his own company in college and was only a year older than me. So I was watching him start a company, have employees, drop out of college to start this business that ended up becoming a very successful business. And, he ended up with 500 employees eventually.
So then you have your father who's in his own business. You have your older brother whom is your mentors in his own business. Yeah. And yet you decide, I just really need to work for somebody.
Yeah, I came up in the sales channel.
Why didn't you make the left turn? Why'd you make the right turn?
I think it was part of me that I saw him also struggling to make payroll, and I just thought
it looked hard, right?
It looked hard. And I wasn't sure that I had it, like the total belief that I had what it takes. And I saw the great success, but I also saw the times of lean times. And I was thinking, I think I should go to college and get a job and see how that kind of works out. And I ended up, because of the clothing thing, and I got the job with the clothing company, and they moved me to Los Angeles. And it was really important.
When you were, before you get there, when you were in this, this looks too hard, looking at my father and looking at Marty and all that.
Yeah.
Marty's your sort of, he's your mentor. What did Marty say to you? Did Marty, usually what happens in those cases, Marty says, come on, Frankie, you need to join me. You be part of my deal here. Or don't start your own thing. You don't need to go to work for somebody. I mean,
I think he always would say things like that, but it didn't resonate because the fear was there. I think I just saw them payroll and fundraising and struggle, and it was great. But I didn't see freedom because they were in. My dad had struggled at the end, did great for a really long time, and then struggled. And now Marty's in this phase, those early years where you're building sales, and it's all hard. And it didn't look fun. It didn't look fun to me at all. And I was seeing it up close, And he also would call me about everything. I was editing his letters and working on his sales pitch. So I kind of worked there, but didn't really work there, And for years, I was his secretary. He would send me everything to edit and look at. And I just saw that I wasn't sure he was going to make it, frankly, And he had dropped out of college. I remember my father was so upset, that he was going to leave school. You know,
I
you're a
would
green
think so,
kid.
because that's a
Get
core.
back in
That was a
school
core
where
value of your family, which is education. Yeah,
get back in school where you belong. You're a green kid.
yeah.
You know?
How old was Marty when he started that business?
He was a sophomore in college.
My God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was 20
Yeah.
at best. He could have been
It was,
19. Yeah.
yeah, it was incredible. And he had a co-founder and they went off and did
All
it.
right. So take me. So you take this job with,
Yeah, it was called
what was the
Ciro.
what was the guy's name?
Seymour Shapiro was the owner, and Mel Newberger was the national sales manager, and they.
So this good Catholic guy goes to work for these
Yeah.
good Jewish guys out of New York
Yeah.
in the garment district.
Yeah,
It don't get rougher
was-
than that. So what happened?
it was. So they told me that they would hire me, but they didn't know it was December, and I graduated in May, and they weren't sure which territory would be open, but they always have. They can place you somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they came back and said Los Angeles. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And again, my brother Marty was like, oh, what a great opportunity. When are you ever going to learn LA, a whole different part of the country? And all of this. And so I went out there, and there's a few, like I talked about, the moments that kind of change the arc in your life, or people that you meet, mentors that you meet. They started me off as a sort of a sub rep, where I would work in the territory of the rep who had the commission, and he was the salesman of record, but I would be his assistant, and they would teach me the business for 6 or 8 months till I got my own territory. And so he was from England, and he was disciplined and organized, and I'm not an organized and disciplined person.
Okay.
In my companies, no one ever gave me the originals because I might lose them. Detailed. Give me the contract. I don't want it. And so he was the one who taught me how to do my own expense reports. He said, when tax time comes, it's going to be a nightmare. He gave me the expense forms and taught me how to do all of that. And I had to bring
What did
him
he teach you? What did he teach you about selling that product?
I watched him with the customer listen and understand their needs. And I watched him operate. First of all, he had an advantage. He was this incredibly handsome guy with a British accent. And all of the women buyers they were so upset if I came in, because they had Michael Baker from London, and, oh, where's Michael? I could just see their face drop, but he also,
what about Frank Tighe from Dublin? What's wrong with me? Right.
That's right. So he was super organized with his territory. There was no internet. It was 1984, but he had spreadsheets of all of his clients and who did the most buying and when to visit them. And he would make me come to his house every single night and bring him the cards of all the cold calls that I made. And I had to have a nightly meeting with him at night until I finally got enough courage to say to him a few months into it, look, Michael, I'm going to have dinner. I've been working I'm not coming here every day. We can do this on Friday. I finally got a little gumption, and then he was proud of me because, I just did whatever he said for the
How long did you do it?
I was with Michael for about 18 months, and then I got my own territory in near
How
back.
How long did you go to Michael's house every night after work?
It must have been 3 months, 2 or 3 months.
So for 90 days.
Oh, it was horrible.
You were super accountable to this guy.
Yeah.
And what would you do in that nightly meeting?
He would want me to bring the evidence that I actually went and made cold calls. So I had to have the business cards, and we would sit down and we would go through each pitch and how far I got with him and what I said. He was an amazing mentor and a teacher, and he was teaching me how to sell, how to listen. And another thing that he did, all the blocking and tackling, we did a thing where we had seasons. And so you would run like crazy and sell, and they would run out of the piece goods. And then that item would be gone, or the buyers would be done. So you would start in January selling for the next season. And after about 12 weeks, it would be done. And you'd have these breaks where you weren't actively selling. Well, he would go back and assign me to go to every one of the stores and go in the store and count all the sizes, the neck size and the sleeve size they were missing, called fill-ins. And he had me going around giving this customer service at this level, where I would go in and organize them all for them and do their displays for them. And he just gave an extra level of attention to them, that he was sort of their first call. And if they ever needed a connection with another vendor, he would make it for them. And he just modeled for me what it was like to really, not to try to sell them the extra dozen or to trick them into the higher thing. He was somebody who saw what they needed and would get them what they needed whenever they wanted it. And if they ever had a problem, he would drop everything. He answered the call immediately. He stressed for me, call back right away. Don't ever let me hear that they tried to get you and they couldn't get you.
So you learned selling that was really relational selling, not transactional selling. You didn't
Yes.
make a deal and then leave. You were
No.
all over it. You built
Yep.
those customers and built those relationships so they wouldn't go anywhere else.
You know, they talk about it now, customer success and
Yeah,
you know,
right,
post
yeah.
sale. Our whole thing was this relationship and making sure that they were happy and checking with them all the time.
And helping
Yeah, he
them
was-
sell and helping them do well and helping them achieve their goals. Yeah.
yeah.
That was fantastic. So in 18 months, it took 18 months for him to cut you loose on your own territory.
Yeah. And part of that was there had to be an opening. I think I could have done it sooner. But this was funny. You know, I was in LA and it sounded glamorous. We had Southern California, Hawaii, and Japan. Now, he never let me go to Hawaii or Japan. You know, but that was sort of in my profile. And then they gave me my own territory in Mississippi. And so I got Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And my dad said, that doesn't sound like a promotion.
Well, that brought you back home in effect. Okay.
Yeah, I was back in the South.
Did you miss LA?
It was really important for me to go to get out of my comfort zone and to learn and be a total fish out of water. You know, in Los Angeles, it matters if you have a really beautiful car and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I was driving a 1978 Ford LTD and I had a Southern accent. So, you know, I had been in a fraternity and I had lots of dates. And in California, you know, I was this just fish out of water. It was hard socially for a while.
Right. And there was no Tim Cook who made Auburn famous, right? You know, so
no, there was
Auburn.
not.
Where's Auburn, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
but I made some really good friends and I love it now. You know, all this traveling, you go somewhere in the country, I don't need a map. I know every inch of.
I think it's an
San
important
Diego.
thing, though, that what you're saying is it got you out of the house. It got you away from your support group, in effect.
Yeah.
You had to establish yourself. You had to figure out, how am I going to rent an apartment? How am I going to pay for the apartment? Who are my new friends? Where am I going to hang out? Who are my doctors? I mean, you just got to establish a life. That's a real growing up stage, you know. So that's pretty. So I think Marty was absolutely right. Get out of here. Go take the job. I love that.
It was really important. And then I moved back and had my own territory. But the industry was changing, and I found out even if you were really good at what you did and you served your customer, if the market timing is poor, then you're really going to struggle, even if you're very good at what you do. And so what happened was the economy sort of changed and manufacturing went overseas. And we had this high-priced manufacturing in Connecticut. And so our products were very, very expensive.
Oh,
we sold
okay.
to Nordstrom's. And so we started pricing ourselves out of the market. And it was really affecting what we were doing. And they
So when
paid
your market,
you,
no matter how good you are, when your market begins to shrink, you're going to shrink.
It was really hard. And they would pay you on what they shipped, not on what you sold.
Okay.
And so I would sell a few $1 million worth and they would ship 50%. I would only get paid on the 50% that they shipped. And then my customers were angry because they had empty shelf space that they counted.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So I needed to shift out of clothing. I just saw it dying in America. The manufacturing was moving away and it just was not this thing that I was in.
How old were you then?
22.
You were just 22 and you saw all this happening.
That's right. Yeah. And so I had a very good friend. And this also helped me a lot in my life to remember others. I had a friend who was working in healthcare, surgical sales. And he had a company car and he had just been to Switzerland to the factory and he was in the OR with the doctors. It just looked like I want that job, you know, like people do with software sales now. Wow, I want to work for Salesforce, you know. Then, you know, healthcare was really hot. And I didn't have any healthcare experience, but I had sales experience. And this person went out on a limb for me and recommended me to his manager. He could have easily said, oh no, or whatever, I'm too busy. He took the time, understood that I wanted to make a change, and he recommended me for an interview. And that's how I ended up getting into healthcare sales. And
was he a buddy from Auburn?
He actually it's a long story, but he was a friend who moved to our small town that we met. He had gone to Auburn by coincidence, but he became a friend of ours. He was Catholic. He came to this small town in Anniston, and he saw us at church in khakis and penny loafers and button downs. And he walked over to my brother, I think, and said, oh my God, this is going to sound weird, but I moved here. He was working for Armour Dial, selling soap to grocery stores, and he couldn't find anybody young that looked like him. He became part of our friend group, and he ended up in this surgical.
So this is childhood friends.
Yeah.
Later childhood.
He came, and then he introduced me to this company that hired me, this company based in Switzerland. And I ended up going through the ranks in the sales and then sales management, and then ended up running the company with him.
Well, how did you wind up getting into how do you onboard from here I am, I'm selling shirts manufactured in Connecticut. All of a sudden I'm in healthcare. How do you was it
one of the
devices? Is that
it was medical devices, and it was to eye surgeons. And the thing,
what did you know about all that?
I didn't know anything, but they did something interesting. Their philosophy was, we want good salespeople who haven't been in healthcare, who don't have these preconceived notions of what sells and what doesn't, and which customer would buy and which wasn't. If you're good in sales, we can train you on the product.
Okay.
We want to hire good salespeople. And so he recommended me, and I did well in the interview, and they hired me. So they taught me. Then they did this period of training where I had to go.
What was your closing line in the interview?
I think I did the exact same thing. It was funny. I basically was using some form of that. I would say to him, is there anything in my background or experience that gives you pause? And usually they won't say no, and he says no. And I said, great. So based on the information that I shared with you today, are you willing to offer me the job? And he said, yes. So I'm like, I'm still
Tom Hopkins comes back again, right?
I need to pay Tom Hopkins commission.
You should send him a letter of thanks. But go ahead.
This is where God works in your life too, Charlie. My wife is living in Chicago, and I had met her. Again, my brother Marty is dominant in my life. She was my brother's wife's best friend from kindergarten.
Oh,
and she came to visit. She came to visit them in Atlanta, and I was here by chance and met her. And so I had only been on like one date with her, and I got this offer to move to Chicago. And now she's thinking, hey, wait a minute. No, what are you doing? But it had nothing to do with her. It was coincidental. The surgical sales job was for Chicago. So if I hadn't moved to Chicago, I wouldn't have had a chance to date her and then eventually marry her. So this job offer also opened my life to my wife and my children and everything. And
how long are you married now, Frank?
32 years.
And how many kids?
We have triplets.
And that's a chance meeting.
Yeah.
In Atlanta.
Yep.
That's fantastic. So you said she came from Chicago to visit Atlanta?
Yeah, she was very good friends with my sister-in-law, and she was visiting my brother and sister-in-law, and my brother actually said.
But she was from Chicago.
Cleveland, Ohio, but was working in Chicago for Merck, the pharmaceutical company.
And then you wind up getting this job in your first territory, Chicago.
Yep.
Wow.
And so then I met her and gone on a date with her, and I started dating her in Chicago. And then a year and a half later, I asked her to marry me.
That's wonderful. So tell me about, how did they teach you? So they say, okay, we got good raw material. We got a guy that knows how to sell. How do you take a guy that knows how to sell and bring him along so that he understands not only the product, but understands the people he's going to be selling to?
Yeah. One of the interesting things was they had this great training program where you would go and you would do the deep dive, of course, into the product. And then they would have you travel with the other salesmen. And we also did lots and lots and lots of trade shows. And so when you were training, they would send you to a trade show and you would be with the other sales reps as they were demoing live the physical products in their hands, showing the surgeon, talking to them. And so you were able to sort of watch and participate and be there in live training exercises at these trade shows. And we had a trade show every single week. We were doing one every single week. Every week there was some either a small one or a larger one or a regional one. And so you had all these opportunities when you were training to be right there with the sales rep. And I realized too how much I learned from others on how they closed, on what they said, on how they approached the customer, all these, and you would be with 3 or 4 of them and you would see all of their skills. Some would be better than others. And I learned from each and every one of them. That experience share, Charlie, is so important. You have people tell you something or they give you their opinion. It's what we do at ATDC now too. We try to experience share. If I haven't had that experience, I'm not going to speak up. I'm going to connect you with someone who had that experience. And that was
a lot
true
different than somebody just read a book and said, "Hey, I read this cool idea," or spitballing with you saying, "Here's something you might try," right? I agree with that. That's really good. So what are you telling me is the way that they taught you? Here you are going into healthcare, and the way that doctors are trained, it's very famous. It's the famous model is watch one, do one, teach one.
Exactly the same way.
And that's exactly what they did for you.
Yep. And
So
then
you
they
got
would
a tremendous amount of times to watch because there were so many of those little shows that they had all over the place.
Yeah, and then the other primary selling environment was in the operating room. And so you would take these samples and you would go and observe surgery. And so they might do 40 cataract surgeries in a day, and you'd show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, get in a scrub suit, bring donuts to the nurses, basically, and then stand there and watch on the microscope as they worked on these patients. And you're in the room and bringing the things to try.
Is that fairly typical that they bring in the medical device guys always in the room?
Medical device guy is there, and they bring the samples for them to try. They're all FDA approved.
I see.
And then you would talk to them about it while they're scrubbing their hands or in between cases. And you end up with them all day and built these really close personal relationships, and go to dinner with them and really get to know them.
What did you learn? What did you learn about you? You understood retailers, okay? Because you were selling shirts, right? You understood merchandising. You understood all that stuff. What did you learn? What did you learn about doctors?
They're heavily influenced by respected experts. So whoever the top speakers are in the world, whatever they're promoting, that sort of experience share among that group of surgeons is big. So if the top guy is using something, they all want to use it. And so we would make sure to have the key opinion leaders get to them first, and also the universities that train new doctors, fellowships, and residents. We would always want to get into those programs because you're creating future customers. But the thing that we found, that surgeons want the latest technology. It was set up for success because if you had the newest toy,
surgeons are natural innovators.
They are, and they want to design products. They want to improve it. They want what the latest thing is. So they were very receptive to you coming because they wanted to know what was new and what could they try. And what?
Oh wow! So culturally, it was a great place to cold call because culturally they wanted to. You were the guy bringing the new technology ideas.
Yeah, and if you showed up, out in the middle of Iowa somewhere, if you said you were from the company that I was from, they would see me. You always hear the doctor's busy and they don't want to see you. I would just tell him Greasehaber, that was the name of this Swiss company, is here, and he would be like, "Where are the new toys? What do you got?" And, they would want to see what the latest thing was.
Well, they say that also. So I heard about pharmaceutical reps, for example, in a lot of cases, they sell a couple of drugs, right? Maybe one or two. And so they're like way, way narrow and way, way deep in what they know about that particular disease, if you will. Okay. Yeah. To the fact that they might actually know more than a doctor knows. So they bring that value to the table. So is that true also then for device sales guys?
Absolutely. You know so much about the surgery and so much about what's new and what's happening and what's coming that they relied on us for what's new and I had a regular case.
This is off the subject just a bit, but has being a device salesman then, now you're talking mid 80s, okay?
Yeah.
All right. You look now and if I'm a doc, can I just go on and look at YouTube videos from the most famous doctors that I admire? You follow me? Why do I need you anymore as a sales guy?
I think it's harder because of the restrictions around access to hospitals right now. And so that's changing for my friends that are in the industry, but
Okay.
they still need to actually do the physical surgery, and they need you to describe to them the features and benefits of the
Got it.
product and safely use it. Um,
So
but
I could
access
watch.
now
So
is
it's in essence, I can watch a video on how to operate a motorcycle. But I do better if I operate a motorcycle and I have you sort of teaching me as I'm going along, right? Yeah, kind of.
yes, and I'll tell you this too. There's a relationship aspect that existed. I ended up knowing every top surgeon in the world personally in this field, and so I stayed in their homes and I went to dinner with
Now,
them,
how
and
many
we.
years did you
No,
do this?
I was at Grieshaber from '87 to '92, and then my company. Sorry, to '97, and then I had my company from '97 to 2010. So that was my career. Basically, was ophthalmology.
So when you, so you would have a relationship with these doctors that you would stay at their homes.
Yeah, go to dinner, stay in their houses,
How did
know
that
their
work?
children.
You
It
had an
just was
expense
this.
report. You
It's
had an expense. I had an expense.
yes, it was certain ones would have you stay with them. I stayed in hotels mostly, but I stayed with them and went to dinner with them and knew their wives and knew their kids. And yeah, it's a very personal thing, and it's clubby. The industry.
Okay.
You're in surgery with them all the time, and I actually was fortunate because the brand that I represented was the Rolls Royce of eye surgery. It was the highest brand, all handmade under the microscope, one at a time, very expensive, very exclusive, and they all want it. And we happened to have a
So
contract
you
with.
ride that becomes part of your brand personally as a sales guy.
Yeah,
Is that you're part of the elite sales group within ophthalmology?
and it's what helped me start my company eventually when I did, because I had the relationships with the top
Well, let's
surgeons at
get
all
into
the
that.
top
Let's get into
things.
that.
Yeah,
Let's get into that.
yeah,
So here you
yeah,
are. You're doing really well with this company. You said it was 85 to 97, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a good long run. So you're 13
yeah.
years into this deal. You must have been top dog. I mean,
Yep. The
who were you at
founder,
that time?
the founders, we ran the US division. There were three of us, a CFO, a head of sales, and I was the head of marketing. There was a three-member management team.
Okay.
And the CEO of the company lived in Switzerland. He's a Swiss guy, and it was a family company over 100 years, and we always thought they would never sell it. And I thought this would be my career, that
Yeah.
we would run this company.
I'm sure you
And
were
we
making
were
pretty good money at
we
the
were
time, right?
we were oh yeah, we were 60% of the sales and all the profit. The US was driving all the innovation. We had an agreement with Johns Hopkins and Duke where we would right of first refusal to license all their technology that they developed, and then we would pay the university a royalty. And so I ended up learning about royalty negotiations. I ended up learning about regulatory. I ended up learning sales and marketing and all of that. And so it was great training for one day when I started my own company.
So you were an expert in the
Yeah.
ophthalmology market, in
Yep.
devices in particular,
Yep. And I went back and I got.
basically worldwide. I mean, but
Yeah.
mostly United States.
Yeah. And
That's
I came up through the sales channel, and I didn't have any background in finance or anything. And I was always a little intimidated. I was part of the senior management team, and we would look at the financials, and I couldn't read them. I didn't know what cash flow
yeah.
statement was. I just couldn't do it. I wasn't sure. So I went back and got my MBA at Emory while I was an executive at that company through the executive MBA program at Emory.
How old were you
And
then?
I was, it was 1996. So I guess I was in my 30s. And I went back and
That would have
got
been
my
your late
MBA.
30s, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and it
And
was
you
the
had your
best
three
thing.
kids then? You had your triplets?
Yeah, they were 5 years old.
And you're going to college again.
Yep, I was. It was every other Friday and Saturday, and then every third week it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Wow.
All,
That's
and
a
I did it for 18 months, and it was fabulous. The
big
relationships.
sacrifice for the family though.
It was a big thing. My wife is just an incredible person. She's amazing.
Okay.
And but
So why
essentially,
did
so
you
I'm
go?
now. What's that?
Why did you choose to do that?
I knew that I was running this company, and if I wanted to go to the next level or do more, I felt this gap in my experience set. Frankly, I felt like kind of like a fraud. I'm running this company with these other two guys, and we do have a CFO. I can't even read the financial statements, Charlie. So I'm great in sales, I'm great in marketing, but I have no understanding of this key fundamental part of the business, which is how we make money. And so I went in I really wanted to increase my financial chops. And so I talked to the founder and said, I wanted to get an MBA. I think it'd be helpful for the business and helpful for me. And they agreed. And
they paid for it.
Well, it was interesting, not to get into too boring details, but they agreed to pay for it. And then there was some grumbling, I think, well, why is this guy doing it and nobody else? And so they came back and they said, look, we'll give you the time, the Fridays and the Thursdays off, but you're going to have to pay for it. And I knew how important this was in my life, so I paid for it.
You paid for it, okay.
They changed the terms of it, but it was fine. And
so then this company, it sounds like at some point this company said, we sold.
Yep. So we were the leader in this space, and it was just an incredible job. And I'm one of those persons, I'm very loyal. I'm very family oriented. And this founder was this CEO was the grandson of the founder. They were going to pass it on to his child. And I had my job for life. Our PMS color for our brochures, our colors, was PMS 285 blue. And I used to say, if you cut me, I'd bleed 285 blue. So all my friends were trying to get jobs with the big players, Alcon and Allergan, and at trade shows. And I didn't. I was cocky. I don't know. I loved it. I never wanted another job, and I didn't network, and I thought it was disloyal, sort of naive. I don't know. And I loved the guy, and he loved me, and I was his guy, and I was traveling all over the world and having this job I never thought I would have, and I loved it. And now I had my MBA, and I had the skill sets, and I was growing as an executive, and our profits were through the roof. And he flew in from Switzerland during the Olympics in '96 and uttered one of these changes the arc of your life moments, Charlie. He walked into my office and he called me Frankie boy. And he said, Frankie boy, what would you do if you didn't work here? And I've got a big mortgage and 3 kids in private school and a wife who doesn't work outside the home. And I've got guests in my home for the Olympics. It's Friday. All I'm thinking about is getting to the volleyball match. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we've had an offer.
Well, it's interesting that all of those thoughts that you just had went through your mind in a second, right?
Yeah, I'm just panic. The guy that doesn't network, what am I? He says this to me and he said, well, go home this weekend and think about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you asking me to quit? I don't even know what this means. There was a little bit of a language barrier sometimes with him. And so anyway, I said, well, what's bringing this on? And they said, well, they have an offer from the world's biggest eye care company, Alcon, to be purchased. And he would get paid on EBITDA. And if they cut the management, he'd get a bigger multiple and he could do this in advance. And he says, you're a smart guy. You've got your MBA. You can probably get your own deal. He's worried more about the others, but he was not going to take care of me because he figured I'm strong. I could do it. I don't know what it was. And I was just shocked. So came home and I'm whispering in the bathroom with my wife. We have guests in our home and we're trying to not.
What did you tell her? What did you tell Ellen when you got home?
What happened? And she's like, what are you going to do? And I just didn't know. And of course, I was just in a total panic. And so, I went back to him and I said, okay, if that's what you want, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. And,
how did you get to that?
That I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know what he wanted me to say.
Okay.
But I didn't want to leave, but that was what it was going to be. And so I didn't know how it was going to work. I immediately went into.
What's interesting though, is you started that day, you and Ellen and the kids with a successful career that looked all the way that you were going to just carry this to retirement in effect. It was just going to be great.
Yeah.
Got great relationships with the market. I got relationships with the owners. They're not going to sell. Everything's going to be fine. 6 hours later, you're home saying, I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay.
So I go back on Monday and I tell him, okay, what do you want? And he said, well,
I'm getting some background noise, Frank.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay.
it turned into a negotiation for the kind of, it immediately switched to preservation on the package. What can
Okay.
I get? You know, and this was in the summer in July. So basically they would pay me through the end of the year, which was really generous, you know, and that I didn't have to come to work, but they would just pay me through the end of the year, and I could keep my company car till the end of the year, and then I could use that time to go and find something else. And
You don't know
so
anything else.
yeah, well, with competitors.
Oh,
And
okay.
he
So what
wrote
do
me
you
a
do?
he wrote me a very generous, you know, he let me draft it, basically beautiful letter about me, and signed it and supported me. And I started talking
So
to the
what's the
other,
nicest thing that you said to yourself in the letter that you wrote for him about you?
you know, that the skill that I demonstrated, a lot of the success was dependent on me, kind of stuff, and brought us to this exit. Kind of, I don't know, you know, one of those kind of things. I wrote it as well as I could, and he put his signature on the bottom, you know. But and he was super supportive of me. You know, the only interesting thing years later that happened, I saw him and he said, "Well, you know, you quit." That was like, and I was like, "Well, I mean, I guess I did, but you offered me the door." It was, I didn't know, did I misinterpret this whole thing? So anyway, but I really love him and he did so much for me. But that was, you know, they sold the company. So I said to my wife, you know, when these things happen, not only am I not there, they're not there. So nothing lasts forever, right?
Yeah.
It was good for me to go through that. So I didn't actually know what I was going to do. And I started interviewing. I had a great resume and I got together with Heidrick and Struggles, and they were putting me in with his executive recruiting things. And all of the opportunities, Charlie, required me to move.
Ah, okay.
They're offering me president roles, CEO roles of companies, but out of town, Memphis. And my children, we loved Atlanta. My family was here. My children loved their school. And I kept more and more, what's in Atlanta in healthcare? And I had, by the way, a scarlet H right here, right? You say, all right, I can be a CEO or be a president, be an executive. I've got my MBA. I've got all this experience. And, oh, you're a healthcare guy. You're a healthcare guy. You're a healthcare guy. It's
Yeah.
what I kept hearing. So now you're in this
But that's
narrow.
an important point, I think, for people to understand. And I say this to people when they come to me and they say things like that. You know, I could run any company. And I go, yeah, but our greatest value in the marketplace is our last gig. It always
Yeah.
is. You know,
Yes.
but and you can't run another, you may be able to run another company, but you got to understand you're competing against people that know that industry cold. So why would they hire you at a healthcare to run manufacturing for clothing, right? You know, I mean, it's that kind of a thing, right? So, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
So then I was, all these opportunities that were coming my way would require me to move. And again, you know, I keep the theme in my life. I keep telling you about my brother. He was saying to me, "You should do your own thing. You know all the customers. You know everybody. You know the regulatory. You know." And I was like, you know, still not there yet. And one of my top customers was Johns Hopkins,
Yeah.
and he came to me and he said, "Look, come up and see me. I want to." I want to see you. And
This is up
so I
in
went up.
Baltimore.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
went up to him. He said, "Look, we have a deal with one of the big companies, Bausch and Lomb, and they have right of first refusal on all these ideas that come out of our lab, and we pay them royalty." He said, "But I have all these ideas they pass on, and I know you know enough. If I let you see these, you're going to see so many gems in here, and I think you're the guy that could take these to market. You know the people, you know the regulatory, you're a known quantity. You could take these, you could license these from us and start your own company."
Were you one?
Is
Was
what he
this
said.
one of the docs that you used to stay at his house?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
He
So
and
this
his,
real close relationship with this guy.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
used, you know, yeah. He was a great friend, and I really admired him. And he was one of the most prolific inventors ever in ophthalmology. And we just
How
were.
about
He
that?
was also, he was from Mobile, Alabama, and he ended up becoming a future investor, and he's a mentor a lot, and a reason for lots of the success that we
So
have. He's such a,
how do you go from the pep talk in Baltimore to a company?
So he
Because
showed me
those
all
scars of having watched your brother and watched your father, they hadn't gone away.
But what actually happened now again was this need. Do I leave and take these opportunities and uproot my family? Or now I'm starting to see myself, well, they're right. These people that are telling, I know the people, I have these relationships. These products are amazing. All I have to do is find some manufacturing. I've got money because I've been careful with my money. So right away, I don't need investors right away. I want to wait until I get the valuation up at least
That's
and get it
pretty
going.
interesting. So you were making, as you were making more and more money with this Swiss company,
Yeah.
moving further and further up in the organization to where you're running U.S. operations with two other guys.
Yeah.
You're making all this money. You didn't live to that level?
We did,
earning?
but we did, but we were saving too.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah. And so then I didn't want, I also, my
But
brother had gone through.
I think it's an important piece, though, that if we do have dry powder, it gives you some options. If you had no dry powder, you probably would have taken a job.
I'll tell you the other most important thing.
Yeah.
This is so important. When I talk to you about my wife had been in sales at Merck. And if you're going to do this, you have to have a partner in this thing. And my wife, the kids were now in school, and Merck loved her and did not want her to leave in the beginning. She went back to Merck because we needed the health care and we needed money. And if we had a salary somehow from my wife, then I wouldn't have to take any salary out of the business. So I went the first 2.5 years after I started the company, I didn't take any compensation. And my wife went back to Merck. We had health care. So I always talked about having an oar in the water. So founders now, if you have an idea, can you do it on the side while you keep your job?
Yeah.
Or do you have another income that can support you? Because you just can't chuck everything and start it. I also was very fortunate. I mentioned my brother a lot, Martin. He had a call center business, and they took calls for top brands, took all of their orders, transactions. So they had an 800 number. You'd place their 800 number in their ads, and their customer service reps would be trained on your product, and they would take all your orders.
Yeah.
So he said to me, we can take all of your orders. You don't need customer service. We can pick, pack, and ship it for you. And so we outsourced all of the calls. And so I started a company, and I had 24-hour day, 7-day a week customer service right out of the box because my brother was giving it.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Marty comes through again. I love it.
And then the other generous thing, the guy at Hopkins basically said, look, here's a negotiated contract. Go in there and put your name in where the other name is, and we'll do this. We need these products to get out of here. You're the guy to do it.
How long did it take you to get? So now you needed to get manufactured. You had to select the product of the products that were passed on by the big company, right? Who was it? Bristol.
Yeah,
Bristol Myers.
It was Bausch and Lomb.
Bausch and Lomb, rather. And then, and so you go through the portfolio, you pick the product that you think is good, talking with the doc, so he advised you, and then you got to find sort of manufacturing to make it a real product, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that means you had to find engineers, and then you had to manufacturing, and then eventually you had to go test it. I mean, there was a lot of steps to go through. It needed FDA approval. It needed all that stuff, didn't it?
Yeah. One of the fortunate things for me, and it was funny, some of the things that you hate in your life, you don't like doing if you have to do the accounting, but you don't love it.
Yeah.
In our company where we had that 3-team management system, anything that wasn't sales was mine.
Okay.
In their mind. So the VP of sales handled sales, but I was VP of marketing, but I also got regulatory. And I hated it because dealing with the FDA, but I ended up being a blessing because I learned how to get 510Ks and how to get approvals for products. And I knew the whole regulatory process.
This is something I see in every entrepreneur's life, especially and even young entrepreneurs, I should say. I was going to say mostly people that are in their mid-30s or so like you were, is there's no wasted experience in your life. Ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything was a building block.
Yeah, right.
Every single thing. And so, so we licensed these products from Johns Hopkins, and they allowed us to pay them on net sales. So if we didn't pay, we didn't owe. I'm sorry, if we didn't sell something, we didn't owe them.
What
there
a
was
great
no minimum.
deal.
Because we were taking these products that they were having trouble sort of moving because other people couldn't see it. And one of the benefits for me, I had been in product development. That was also part of my thing. And I was the guy that was the liaison to Hopkins. So I had been working with him. I understood right away. I looked in that list and I knew which ones were going to be great. And it's very similar to SaaS. These things are consumable. And so you want the products that are thrown away single use because you get the customer and then they buy them
But
for
look
years.
at that.
I have a product.
Very
I have a
close
product
market experience that you had, being right there
Yeah.
in the operating, spending all those years with you knew what would fly and what wouldn't fly. You knew
Right away.
intuitively.
Right away.
I mean, you saw it. Yeah.
Right. And I could not believe that the bigger company who had right of first refusal was passing on these things.
Isn't it interesting how you didn't see any of that on your personal balance sheet? All of those things, relationships, the intuition for the marketplace, understanding the docs, all of this, the manufacturing, FDA, all that. You saw none of that on your personal balance sheet. This doctor saw all of it.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
And he wanted a way to get it out of his lab, and I was a vehicle,
That's really amazing. That's really great how that came together.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to get to start to make some sales and then eventually who was your first sale? That's always the hardest one.
Yeah. The funniest thing was, I don't know, Charlie, that I don't even know how to say this. I don't want to say it wrong, but our first trade show was our first big opportunity was at Moscone Center in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so we would have a tabletop, we made tablecloths with the logos and the pull-up backdrop things. And I needed some help in the booth. And there's many doctors that come from all over the world, from Brazil and South America. It's a huge trade show. And my cousins who lived out in Palo Alto had a beautiful nanny who could speak multiple languages. And they said to me, if you need somebody with language help in your booth, you can bring Claudia and, just pay her for the day. She'll do it for you. So she comes and she's this really attractive South American girl. And there's a German doctor walking by and she says to him, "Hola." And this guy doesn't know who Retina Labs is, my company, right? It's our first day at the first trade show. And he pulls out his corporate American Express and spent $5,000 on our most expensive product within about 30 seconds.
He didn't even know what the product was and he bought it?
Yeah. No, he knew what it was. But my joke about it was, wow, this woman got his attention, not me or not the benefits with it. It was a really great product. But one of our keys to success.
And she was a really beautiful woman, right?
Lovely person and beautiful, attractive. In fact, it's funny. The company that
what a great story that is.
The company that I eventually exited to, the public company, 10 years later, one of the founders said to me during the negotiations, "Hey, whatever happened to Claudia?" She was a temp that I had at Moscone Center for one trade show. And he remembered. I was like, I don't know. That was pretty funny. But we had a very successful.
What was the biggest challenge in so you had your German guy, the German doctor, he's your first sale. What was the biggest challenge in scaling that business?
The biggest challenge at the beginning was in healthcare, you can't sell anything until you get approval.
Right.
And so you have to get FDA approval. So you have these projections, everybody's got your business plan. Until you get approval, you can't sell anything. You can't even market it because it's not approved. And so you're spending all this time.
And there's no hard due date for the FDA to approve it, right?
No, they can do whatever they like. And they can, and they had a clock where they had to respond during certain days, but certain times they would send you a question just to restart the clock, it seemed like. And so it was very difficult to get these. But once I got them, they were valuable because now you had this thing that was, it gave the company value. If you think of
so that was the hardest thing. You're saying the hardest thing was waiting for this approval because I couldn't.
Initially was getting the FDA approvals.
Right.
So if you think of it as a circle that's empty or a box that's empty and you want to fill it up with value, what did the company have? Well, the IP that we licensed from Hopkins gave it value. The regulatory approvals gave it value. And then the the sales and success gave it value to someone, to buy it external. So we
you
got
and
our
your
first
network brought great value. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I will tell you what I learned, Charlie, that I overestimated. I had all these close personal friends, and I thought they all were going to buy from me because it was me.
Yeah.
And I had been with them, and these are my products, and I show up, and it wasn't true. You had to have a value proposition, and they might already be using something else. It didn't matter anymore that it was Frank. They were buying it not because of me. And it seems obvious, but I just
but
assumed
still it had him. But you got in the door and had credibility with them because you were Frank. But then it really did come down to, is this product better than the other product I'm using?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so a big part of it was consumable. So then when you get this run rate going, once you get these customers, they don't change very often. And so we were always looking, we never wanted to re-educate the market. My idea was give them a better mousetrap, right? Give them something that they use, but it does it better. So all of our products were improvements or a better way to do the thing that they were doing now, but would improve their outcome. And then you weren't trying to talk them into doing it a different way.
So you were in ophthalmology in consumable product, new consumable products.
Yeah, we tried to make it.
You just kept a string of those going all the time?
Yep.
How many products did you have when you eventually sold?
Including all the sizes and stuff, there was 150 of them.
My God.
Yeah.
How many individual patents were there that covered that?
We had about 10.
Original patents, not, what I'm saying, not the extensions and all that.
Yeah, we had 10, I think.
Okay, we would so 150 products came out of 10 patents.
Because some of the stuff wasn't patented.
Yeah. Okay.
That it was just stuff that we weren't able to patent, but we were able to sell.
Okay, cool.
One of the most successful products still, it's done over 400 million in sales, and it's owned by Alcon now, the world's biggest eye care company, and they still sell $20-something million a year. I think
so what was your run rate when you in that year that you sold?
I think it was 5 million.
Okay.
Roughly.
And you sold. How did you actually get to? How many people were in the company at the time?
We were doing something pretty ingenious, Charlie. We outsourced all the pick, pack, and ship to a third party. We outsourced all of the customer service to Donnelly, to Martin's company.
Yeah.
And we outsourced all of the R&D to Johns Hopkins in the lab. And so all we had was sales, marketing, distribution, just a handful of people.
So you were a 2020 company before 2020 came.
Yeah. And then we were able to snip everything when we were done because we just had this royalty agreement with Hopkins. We had Donnelly taking over.
Did you have any co-founders or anything, or were you the?
I had two major investors that didn't work in the business, but no co-founder. I had a sort of a co-founder, one that came on after I founded the company, but then he left and went back to Alcon. And so we bought his stock back, but he was my partner, and he was on a vesting schedule, and in all of it didn't vest.
That's pretty cool. So how did the company find you that bought you? Was it Alcon that bought you?
No, the name of the company that bought us was Iridex.
Okay.
And they're traded on the NASDAQ. And what was interesting about it was they sold a laser platform and all the consumables that plugged into it. So they had a great consumable business, but they needed more products. So we had all of these products. They were like a golfer who only had a driver in their bag, and so if you didn't use the laser, then they didn't have anything to sell you.
I got it.
And so we had 30 country distribution where we sold our products in 30 countries. I had
distributors.
We sold direct in the US, but internationally we used distributors because it would be impossible. All of our competitors all use distributors overseas.
How about that?
And it's a global market. Well, Iridex had 130 country distribution. And so just by dropping our products in their bag, they were able to expand the sales.
Yeah, that's called true synergy, right? You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
pretty
And so,
amazing. So
so
they
we
pay you for
negotiated.
what your business is worth, and then just by dropping it into their network, it becomes 3x whatever they paid, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then and then I became a VP in their company for 2 years, with a non-compete.
How'd that work?
It was great. I loved it.
So you still
But
like,
it was,
so you were working for somebody now. Okay. So,
yeah, yeah. And it was fun. And they had 130 country distribution. So I was traveling all over the world, integrating my stuff into theirs and, still with all my customers that I loved. And it was great. It was super frustrating because they're a public company and they needed approvals for everything. And I was fast and we could do everything right away. And it was very frustrating. I remember we had a product. The CE mark is what you need to sell products in Europe, physical products. You have to get the approval for the CE mark. And there's a rule that that every product that gets the CE mark have to have this user instruction in there. But there's an exception to it that if a reasonable surgeon can know how to use it, like a pair of scissors, you don't have to put one of those in there. You can keep it on file. So we didn't, and they had to be translated into 27 languages. And we didn't put those big things in these small little boxes,
yeah.
We had a special dispenser for our most successful product. The nurses loved it. It was this tiny little thing that fit on the shelf and it dispensed perfectly. Well, I sell to the public company and the head of regulatory says it needs this user instruction and we're going to have to increase the size of the box and put this manual in there, translated in 27 languages. And I said, no, you don't need that, because the regulations say that you can keep it on file and you don't need to do that. And he goes, well, I won't sign it. I won't sign off on it unless we do it this way. And so they changed the packaging in the box. And those kind of things were for an entrepreneur.
How did you wind up leaving?
I had an agreement for 2 years and it was always understood when that was up that would be it.
So when you got to the end of the 2 years, they didn't come back to you and say, why don't you just keep, stay on with it?
I did stay for another 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
And then that was it. That I was ready to be done. So
what do you do then? So now you're unemployed. You got some money in your pocket, but you're unemployed.
No, yeah, it was great. So I started deciding, do I want to do another one? And that's even, I've talked to you about this struggle. This is a 10-year run for any entrepreneur that wants to do this. You can say it might be 6, it might be back of the envelope. This is a 10-year deal. If you're going to put your head down and start from scratch.
Build real value, it's going to take 10 years.
What always drove me was being hungry. Now I'm not hungry. Right. And so, if you don't have to do it now, will you go back?
But the funny thing is, you're not hungry, but you have to pretend you are hungry, right?
That's right.
When you're in the market, you got to oh yeah, I'm ready for the next one and all that. But there's this, and the truth is you're not as hungry as when you started.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Okay.
So I had been, I interviewed again. I got back with Heidrick and Struggles and all of the opportunities again, capital H, everything's healthcare. Everything requires me to move.
Now it's capital H squared. Okay.
Yeah, you're a healthcare guy. You're going to move. And so I was enjoying myself. And my wife said, well, what are you going to do? You're, 49 years old or whatever I was, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm not really sure. And so a friend of mine said, you should talk to ATDC. They're looking for founders who have raised capital, that have had exits, to help coach other founders. And I said, well, I've never even heard of that place, and I live in Atlanta, but I didn't know a lot about Georgia Tech. And
what does it stand for?
The Advanced Technology Development Center.
And it's an incubator within
an incubator at Georgia Tech. And basically our goal is economic development for the state of Georgia. We want venture capitalists to invest in Georgia. We want hiring to happen in Georgia to create employment in Georgia. We want the graduates of Georgia Tech and other universities to get jobs. And it's an incredibly successful program. Well, I didn't do anything about it. And then my lawyer, Clint Richardson, who had negotiated our deal to the public company.
Clint. Yeah.
He's a fabulous lawyer. He did so great for us. They had
wrote the book on terms.
Yeah. They had Wilson Sonsini and we had Clint, and I think we did okay in
Yeah, Clint's he was good.
But he said to me, he ran the Southern Capital Forum at the time. He
Yeah.
was one of the founders of that. And he said, you really ought to talk to ATDC. They're looking for people like you. I said, you're the second person this month that's told me about that. And so I called, and they put me in touch. I called down to ATDC, and they put me in touch with Tim Sheehan, who's now the CEO of our most recent unicorn, Greenlight.
Right.
And Tim was the lead entrepreneur in residence, and he was looking for founders that had raised capital with an exit. And he said, come down and see me. And I went down and saw him at ATDC, and I saw all the companies, and it reminded me very much of Hopkins, where we were taking this technology early stage and trying to get it done. But it was full companies instead of individual products. And I thought, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then he decided to give me a trial period, I think. So I said, well, I also was saying, well, forget whether or not you're going to hire me. How can I help? How can I get involved? And he said, well, there's this company, and it was a healthcare company, and they needed some help. And so I jumped in and helped them negotiate a term sheet, and I helped them do so well. They said to Tim, wow, he was amazing, or something like that, And then Tim hired me as an EIR. And so I started working part-time at Georgia Tech, helping. And I'm super passionate about it. My scorecard's always been money and all of that. And now when that's not your scorecard anymore, what do you do? You and I have talked about this. What do you do with your life? How do you reset and do something different? And I feel like I have this background and experience set now that really lends itself to this type of work where I'm experience sharing, because founders, they will respect you if you've walked in their shoes. So, my category or my requirements for hiring future EIRs is a founder.
Because now you are the Tim Sheehan. You're the guy that's leading all the EIRs. You're the hirer.
I started out as an EIR, and then when Tim left, and we had one other, they asked me to be the lead EIR.
I see. Okay.
So now I'm looking for other people like me, but this is technology, not healthcare. We have healthcare IT, but most of these are SaaS businesses. And now that I've been doing this a while, I really understand it.
What's the criteria that you use in bringing on EIRs to help these aspiring entrepreneurs that are part of the ATDC?
First of all, these people are very hard to find. And I've defined that criteria, I said a minute ago, a founder who's raised capital with an exit. So you can't be somebody that was on the senior team I want someone who sat in the chair as the CEO that had to make those decisions.
Got it.
That had the burden of the company and the responsibility and the
for
knowledge.
A true peer.
Absolute peer, because when they close the door, the founder of these companies is supposed to know everything. And where do they go? They can't tell their wife or husband. They don't want to hear it. They can't tell their board. They might get fired. They can't tell their employees. They might quit. Where can they go and really show vulnerability and share with someone who's walked through that with you? Who's done it, who's walked in your shoes.
Did you make some mistakes in actually bringing on EIRs?
Yes.
Okay.
I've made a few. When I strayed from
What were they missing? What were they missing?
They weren't the biggest problem was if they weren't the CEO. The other thing would be, were they true founder? Did they take it? Because it might be fine. We have other roles on our staff called catalysts. They're coaches. And they're experts in marketing, they're experts in sales, and they're fabulous people. They make the place run. Mm-hmm. But in this particular role, I found that to be successful, you have to have been the CEO. You have to have negotiated term sheets. Because what's happening is all of these companies are starting from scratch. They're all learning to sell. They're learning to get product market fit. They're trying to raise money. They need someone who's actually done it, who has the actual experience.
Makes total sense. So what's your pitch? If we're going to have entrepreneurs who are going to be listening to this that are going to be some early stage, so they might be prospects for ATDC. How do I know if I am a prospect for ATDC?
If you have a technology business in the state of Georgia, you should come. If it's a startup in technology, you should come and see us and let us talk to you.
Okay.
The we basically, our primary mission is to get you to your first million in recurring revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that in some core ways. We have some core programs that we call the Connect programs. One is Campus Connect. We go to all of the trade shows and all of the career fairs, and every company
At Georgia
in the
Tech.
country, yeah, every company in the country wants to come to Georgia Tech to hire our graduates.
I see.
So if you need interns or you need developers or you need graduates of Georgia Tech, we can connect you to them and let you be a part of that recruiting network.
Okay.
So if you're looking for talent, it's a great way to recruit talent. We have, as you know, Investor Connect. Brad Swizer runs that for us, a great young lawyer who has experience in startups and in law. And we connect you to investors, to angel investors,
Right.
venture investors to raise capital for your business. And we have another program, Industry Connect, where we bring in Fortune 1000s to Georgia Tech and connect our startups for pilots with them to get sales.
That's
and then
great.
we have
That's a lot of
tours
high
for
value.
sales.
Plus, you've got, like you said, the catalyst who will help you functionally, and then you've got the EIRs who will help you as a founder to kind of help you develop as a leader.
Yeah, and if you need office space, in the incubator we have office space that's available at a discount that's supported by the state.
One of the things I always used to say is that from an investor standpoint, that the ATDC is like a fishbowl. That it's an opportunity for a venture capitalist to fly into town, and they could see so many companies by just visiting you at the ATDC. You give them a tour, and it just like opens their eyes, and they're all vetted companies. It's pretty incredible. So it's a very high value add. ATDC, by the way, started in 1980, I think it was. So it's the oldest incubator attached to a university in the world. Okay, for startups. So it's incredibly well known it's got a great brand, and you guys have done a lot in bringing it forward, you and John. So congratulations to you and the team. So what's the next step for Frank here? What do we do, Frank?
I talk to you about this all the time, Charlie. I've had opportunities because I'm at ATDC. Lots of people, lots of companies come through that you could either be the CEO of. I had an opportunity to run a venture fund. A new venture fund in town recently. And so these opportunities come up, and I might take one of them and I might not. I love doing what I'm doing now. And for the first time in my life, I'm not looking ahead to what's next. I'm enjoying the present moment. I'm enjoying my children and my family and my life and my work. And I get so much value out of this. You have this experience set that you can share with others that really helps. There's no better feeling than when you help someone negotiate a term sheet, or you connect them to the right people, and then they succeed and then they appreciate it. It's rewarding. I'd shy away from this term giving back. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm not really giving back. The benefits of what I offer, I think the experience share helps these entrepreneurs, but I'm there for me because I love it. It gives me joy and it's fun. So I found a way.
Frank, you're natural at just you're natural with people. You enjoy people. You have a servant's heart, and it goes all the way back to the clothing stores where you were actually helping them, sell their inventory, merchandise it properly, fill out the holes in their inventory and all. You were there. There's people that would say, look, I sell the stuff. I don't do that. Okay. But it all fits for you. It fits for you with the doctors. There's a consistency in that you love people, you serve people, and you want to see them succeed. I can't say how many times you've helped me and how many times you've encouraged me personally as an angel investor. You always, if I'm down, I could go see Frank, and you're going to make me feel like $1 million and get me back on my feet and get me back in the game. So I love you, and I appreciate you, Frank. I think you're terrific, and they are so fortunate, ATDC, to have you there leading the EIR.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah.
Well, I look at you sort of as a mentor for me in this what do you do next kind of a thing. And you're at ATDC volunteering, and you're running our Angel Lounge, and you're networking, and you're putting out your podcast, and you're helping so many people. I've watched you, and I say, wow, I want to be like Charlie. I want to do what you're doing, helping others. And it's really fun. And we're having an impact. Our company's raised over $100 million last year during COVID, during this pandemic.
That's great.
It's just incredible. And there's so many bright, cool young entrepreneurs at Georgia Tech and at ATDC. It's just
so special to be attached to the to Georgia Tech. Period. I mean, the resources of Georgia Tech are just incredible. And I always say that you guys are you're the entry, you're the door to get into the resources of Georgia Tech that are so deep and so well hidden, if you will. It's from looking at it from the outside, it's like looking at the Apple headquarters. You say, like, I know I could make a lot of money if I can get in there, but I don't even know what door to go in. It's just a big round piece of glass, right? But you guys have it figured out. But Frank, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. I think one of the things that I learned is that, you don't have to have this sort of entrepreneur thing in your blood saying, I just have to do it. Now, you've had experience watching your dad and your brother do it, but the other side is that you build such great relationships that sometimes the people that you serve are the people that are the encouragers who get you into an occupation you never thought you'd be in. And,
yes. Charlie, I've always thought, I've had this lifelong question for me: are entrepreneurs born, or do their circumstances make them? And I find more and more, people, you get fired late in life, and then you can't replace what you were making, maybe, or you just always had this passion, and then you get pushed. It's so common. So anyone out there that's thinking, that they want to start a company, but they're unsure, I'll tell you this: it has given me so much fulfillment having my own company. And at the time, it seemed like a tragedy. And one thing I kind of want to leave you with is, and for everyone, is to look for the blessing in every setback, right? Every time that I thought something was the worst thing, you break up with your girlfriend, you meet your wife, I lost that job, that dream job, but it led me to start my own company. And then I had more time with my children, even though I was working more. Before, I was traveling all over the world, and now I was focused on running the company. I was home more. And then I built value in the company that's, coming to me for the rest of my life. And it just was the greatest thing, not the worst thing that ever happened to me.
That's amazing. Well, Frank,
and so
you're a great entrepreneur. You're a great businessman. You're a great executive. And now you're a great servant. All right. You're doing a terrific job. And you're a great friend. So thanks for being on the show here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me and all you're doing for entrepreneurs in Georgia, Charlie. I love you. You're a great guy. Thank you.
Well, if you'd like to hear more interviews of people like Frank, who have tremendous ideas and tremendous experiences to share, things that you can take and learn, whether it be in your life or be in your career, then come join us on the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'd also appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel and that you'd share it with your peers, your entrepreneur friends, or those who might be even thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you for spending your valuable time here. I hope you walked away with something that you can apply today. Thanks. And thank you, Frank. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Sure.